preschoolers. So if you have littles 5 or younger, you're welcome to join. It's a group of mamas and we do life together. Oh, okay. Perfect.
Honestly, I feel like we would lose our accountability. When I first started to this church, we would arrive late and leave early. We didn't want to talk to anyone. We just wanted to be by ourselves. And so we started our small group, meeting with our friends pretty much now. We see them at church every single Sunday. And so if one of us would miss a service, we knew that there would be someone at church the next Sunday being there and checking in with us, asking how we're doing, if everything's okay, if we need any help with anything. There's that encouragement. There's those you have that support. You can't, Pastor Kyle, you can't really do it all. So that's what the small groups are there. They're there to kind of give you a little bit of backup, to check in with everyone else.
Hello friends, welcome to Life Community Church. My name's Kyle, and whether you're here in the room or online, we are so glad that you've come to gather together. And we'd love to get to know you better. If you're new or new-ish, we would love for you to take out your phone, scan that QR code you see on your screen, and fill out as much contact info as you feel comfortable. And one of our team members would love to follow up with you, get to know you, and help you take your next steps in your journey with Jesus. I don't know who you are or what brought you here, but I believe that God has a plan for your life. And together, in community, through His truth and through His people, we want to help you love and follow Jesus wherever you are in this spiritual journey. We're glad you're on the journey with us.
Come set your rule and reign in our hearts again. Increase in us, we pray, unveil why we're made. Come set our hearts ablaze with hope, like wildfire in our very souls. Holy Spirit, come invade us now. We are your church. We need your power in us. We seek your kingdom first. We hunger and we thirst. We refuse to waste our lives for your adored eyes. To see the captive hearts release, the hurt, the sick, the poor at peace. We lay down our lives for heaven's cause.
welcome everybody. My name is Will Derryberry. I'm the worship pastor here. It's so good to see all of you. Hey, I just want to, I don't think I do this enough, but I just want to say and give props and love to our worship team, our tech teams here. Can you show them some love? You know, the awesome thing about our teams here is that they're all volunteers. They're a part of this community, this church with us. And there's not one diva among us. Musicians, you got to be careful with them. They're very vulnerable. But these folks get it. They're here for the right reason. They're here. They keep the main thing. That is Jesus. We're here to worship him. We're here to get in his presence and lift him up and give him the worth and adoration that he deserves. So some of you may be going, well, that's great for you guys. You're gifted at doing that and all that. But I'm going to sort of like, I'm going to have to pass on ever wanting to ever be a part of what you guys are doing here as far as, music and all that kind of stuff. But something that we're all called to, that is compassion. That is what we're going to be talking about here this morning. And you may have noticed as you've come through the doors here that we're spending a little extra time on letting you guys know more about our compassion ministries here. It's something that we can all be a part of and do. So please visit those areas when you leave here today. Would you guys pray with us? God, we thank you. We thank you that you're here among us. We thank you that you speak to our hearts and our minds, reminding us of who we are. God, I pray for continued discernment and the knowing that you have called us to something special. That is to be light and love to the world around us. No matter what that looks like, how unique that is, it's a part of who we are as the body of Christ. All coming together, hands, the feet, and being your light, your truth, and your love to the world around us. Help us to continue to live into that as we continue to move into this time with you. God, may we worship you in spirit and in truth. We love you. We need you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Everybody said,
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the end and I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes open. 'Cause when you call my name, out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You call my name, and out of that grave, into your glorious day. Your glorious day. Into your glorious day. It's time for the sleeper to wake. It's time for the old winds to change. I hear the Spirit say, it's time. It's time for the dead man to rise. It's time for the great light to shine. I hear the Spirit say, it's time. Sing wide heavenly gates. Let the King of glory, let the King of glory Let the light in, let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, let the light in, let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, let the light in, let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, open up the windows. Let the light in, let the light in, let the light in. Bring light in, heavenly gates. Let the King of Glory in. Let the King of Glory in. Come right in on your people's face. Let the King of Glory in. Let the King of Glory in. Bring light in, heavenly gates. Let the King of Glory in. Let the King of Glory in. Come right in on your people's face. Let the King of Glory in. Let the King of
Amen. As we look through the Bible, and there are so many examples of God's compassion for his people. It starts in the Garden of Eden when he clothes us even after we've sinned, and all those stories in the Gospels of Jesus. You have the story that we just talked about last week with the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus could have sent everyone away and said, go provide for yourself, but he had compassion on them and said, I will make do with what we have and bless you abundantly. All the healings of people that he showed, and he cried at Lazarus's grave for the compassion he had, not only for his friend who had died, but of his sisters who were also his friend. He wept with them. He gives us an example of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Just all throughout the good book, there are stories of his compassion for us and an example of who we are supposed to be. And I'm just reminded on the 21st anniversary of 9/11 is today. And the horrific acts that happened, but also what a glimpse into the compassion that we as humans can have for one another. The people that gave their lives to try and save others. Just that feeling of community and wanting to help people. I long for that right now. I want to go back, and I want us to be a church that is known for that. When there is a need, we see it, we have compassion, and we act on it. And that might be different for all of you. For some of you, it may just be crying with someone who needs that empathy, or it might be going out and serving people. But whatever it is, let us live into that calling that God has given us to be compassionate for the world around us.
And it would be give all myself. I give all myself to you. And I give all myself. I give all myself. I give all myself to you.
Well, good morning. It is so good to see so many people here packing out. It's great to see you folks online. We love you. We see you. We're glad you're here. I also love seeing the sea of red. I'm seeing a little spattering here and there. Those of you who are currently recording the 49er game, we love you. We're glad you're here. And I understand that I'm on a time crunch because at some point you're just going to walk out of here, so I get that. But we're just so glad you're here. If we haven't met yet, my name's Kyle. I'm one of the pastors here. We're a church that just seeks to love folks one at a time. And so if we haven't met, I'd love to meet you out in the lobby, connect with you again at the 411 table to get more information. You saw there's a compassion fair out there. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And if you are new or newish, I'd love for you just to grab your phone, scan that QR code there, and we'd love to help you get connected here. We're just seeing so many new people, and we love it. And the only thing we love more than that is seeing new folks getting connected in life-changing relationships. So again, you know that you're not alone in this crazy journey. Thinking about loneliness in the journey, I think one of the things that, for me as a pastor, it's sometimes hard to say, is that sometimes I have this question about where is God? Have any of you asked that question before? I don't know about you, but when I went to seminary, which is graduate school for pastors, I got a degree called a Master's of Divinity. Let me say that again, a Master's of Divinity. And no, I did not get that at Hogwarts, but I would not, if you could come on, that was a better joke than that laugh was worth. But it's interesting. I think the title Master of Divinity is a crazy title because essentially saying that after 3 years of graduate school, some 25-year-old kid has just mastered the divine. That's the most inaccurate degree ever. And in the moments, I have this thing about, even though I have mastered the divine, I still wonder, where the heck is he? You been there? You're going through the ups and downs of your own life, and you're like, well, God, where are you here? How come sometimes it seems like you're so close and seems like you're so far away, and the times where I need you the closest, like, where are you? Or maybe it's not you. Maybe you're like, my life's awesome, but as I look at the people around me, those who I love and care about, and watching family members hurt, watching coworkers suffer, watching people in my own community go through heartbreaking stuff, like, God, why don't you just step in and do something about that? And maybe it's not up close and personal for you. Maybe you just turn on the news, you look around, you see wars, famine, natural disasters. If God is so good and loving, why the heck doesn't he jump in and stop some of these things that are causing so much human suffering? God, where are you? You been there? You see, in this week, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a text that asks this question, God, where are you in the ups and downs of life? And it's interesting, the way this book asks this question is it asks it without asking the question. And it answers the question without talking about what God is doing at all. It's narratively beautiful. And I think it's put in the scriptures, one of those 66 books of the Bible, because every single person at some point asked that question, God, where are you? And today we're going to look at a little book called Ruth, which asks the question, God, where are you? But if I'm just a spoiler alert, it never has God say anything. It never has God do anything. And in some mysterious way, it answers the question of where is God in the good and the bad. So if you have your Bibles, go to Ruth chapter 1. If you're trying to turn there, go all the way to the beginning. You start with Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Those are the first 5 books of the Bible, known as the Law, the Torah, the Pentateuch. And then you get to the history books, Joshua, Judges, and then Ruth. And in this, we're going to say, where is God in the midst of the good and the bad, but particularly, where is God in the midst of the bad? Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 begins like this. In the days the judges ruled, real quick, Bible background for you. There was a time in which there was no clear leadership, and there was these folks named the judges, and God would rise up these judges every time the people were helpless and couldn't do it. But really, it's a time where people did whatever they wanted, and they continued to get themselves in trouble. It was one of the darkest seasons in the history of Israel. So you know it's already bad because it's a time where the judges rule. There was a famine in the land. No food. Increased gas prices. Home affordability, really struggling. Trying to figure out, do I want to pay my medical bill or my rent? And all those great plans I had, that's not going to happen. Retiring, nope, that's going to be another 5 years. And I was going to have a family member who's going to move to this area and be there to help me raise my kids, and now they can't afford it, and they're off to some other state. Oh, just me? Okay. So a man from Bethlehem went in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, they went to live for a while in the country of Moab. Irony here, there's no food, and they're leaving Bethlehem. Bethlehem means house of bread, and they're leaving. And where are they going? They're going to the country of Moab. Now, if you were going to look at a map, and you were going to look at Israel and then Moab, it'd be like there's a famine in Roseville, so they're going to Rockland. I said, what? And there's this question that the ancient reader is saying, well, why are they going to Moab? Moab is actually known as a place with pagan gods and known for sexual sin. Why would they go to this pagan place unless they believe the topography and the water, the sand, the soil is not that different? Maybe they're going to Moab because maybe they trust the gods of Moab more than the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one true God, Yahweh, who delivered them from Egypt. Maybe they're going to Moab because of that. Or it's also possible that they're going to Moab because in the past, when the people of God have had a famine, last time they went to a place called Egypt, and it ended up in hundreds of years of slavery and suffering, and maybe they say, we're not going to make the mistakes that my forefathers did. And in this moment, we know there's desperation in the famine, and everyone's asking, are you going to Moab because you trust that God more, or are you just being faithful to Yahweh, the God who rescued you from Egypt, and not reliving it? We don't know. The name of his sons were Mahon and Kilion. The guy's name is Elimelech. His wife is Naomi. That's important. We'll get there. And his sons are Mahon and Kilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died and was left there with 2 sons. They married Moabite women, which God had commanded them not to do, marry folks of a different faith, because it gets a little awkward around the holidays. They married these other women, Orpah's great aunt, and Ruth. If we're talking about human suffering, we gotta have some jokes in here, right? Come on. And they lived about 10 years. Both Mahlon and Kilion also died. Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. There's a famine in her homeland, so now she's fleeing to another place where she doesn't know the culture, she doesn't know the language, she doesn't have any social connections there. But it's okay because she has her husband, the patriarch, as a provider and a protector, and these two strong sons, right, who are able-bodied so they can help run whatever family business they start when they get there. And then they go and take these wives, and these 3 women are completely dependent on these 3 men in a time where there's no excess, there's no extra money, and now all of a sudden, she's a foreigner, she's a widow, and she has these 2 women, and she's like, I can't take care of myself, let alone them. I bet Naomi's asking the question, hey God, where are you in all of this? Verse 6, when Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of the people by providing them food, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home. Hey, I hear the crops in Israel are great. Let's go back. Verse 7, with her 2 daughters, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to Judah, their homeland. Verse 8, Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back each of you to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness as you have shown to me. Even in her desperation, she's praying blessing over these people. It's a beautiful moment. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. She's essentially saying we live in a patriarchal society where men are needed for provision and protection, and I know my sons died and left you helpless, so hopefully God will provide you another man. She kissed them goodbye and wept aloud and said to her, we will go back to you and your people. Naomi said, no, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going? Sorry, I can't read this morning. What's going on? Okay. Am I going to have more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband, and even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and gave birth to 2 sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord has turned against me. In this patriarchal society, she's saying, I can't get remarried. I can't have kids fast enough. You've got to go find someone else to take care of you. And those of us with a modern reading, those of us who are for women's independence and women having jobs, somebody like, whoa, what is going on here? This is the world in which they live. This is not the world that God says this is the way it's supposed to be. But this is God entering into the world as it is. At this, they wept aloud. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and said goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Look, said Naomi, your sister is going back to the people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, I love this line, don't urge me to leave you or go back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me ever so severely if even death separates you and me. This, if you go back and look at the Hebrew context here, the theological term for this is Ruth is saying, I'm your ride or die. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on, and they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And they said, can this be Naomi? Wait, didn't you go to Moab to try and find food and a family and now you come back and now your husband and your sons aren't with you and you look a little older, but somehow you're back, and who's this girl you bring along? And she says this, verse 20, don't call me Naomi, she said, call me Mara, because the Lord Almighty has made me very bitter. The word Mara in Hebrew means bitter. I went away, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Lord Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. The Lord has given me misfortune. The Lord has made me bitter. The Lord has done nothing. Define me by my bitterness. Is that true? Has the Lord forsaken her? Everyone's wondering it. She's choosing to be defined by bitter, and she comes back with nothing? That's obviously not true. She's coming back with Ruth, a ride or die. And in that moment, I just want to tell you, if you are there in that moment where you feel abandoned, you feel forgotten, you feel like God has forsaken you, and you're going to be defined by the things, by your biggest struggle in life, if that is you, you are not alone. There are people in the faith who have gone before you and felt the exact same thing. But let me be clear. Just because you feel it, just because that's your current reality, doesn't mean it's the ultimate reality. But even in your questions, in your suffering, God can come and meet you there. So let me say these two things to be true. It's good and okay for you to be honest about your feelings and disappointment with God. That is something you need to do. When you are a mom who loses the baby in your belly, when you are there and you lose your job, when you're there and your marriage falls apart, you're like, God, where are you? It is okay to be completely and totally honest with God in your frustrations. But here in this, we see this question that the author is asking, will you be defined by your bitterness? Will you choose to believe that God has left you? And is that true? You see the narrative tension continuing to build. We go from famine, now family's gone, now she's defining herself this way. Verse 22. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem at the barley harvest. So she gets back, define me as bitter, and at the time she's looking at everyone else and saying, everyone else is harvesting their barley right now. Everybody else is doing great. Everybody else has children. They're well behaved. They do exactly what they want. Their 401ks are awesome. They found a place with cheaper gas. Everybody else's life is awesome except for mine. Raise your hand if you want Naomi's life right now. This is the question. And where is God? Who knows? Verse 2. Now Naomi, hey, can I get a whiteboard? Whoever, some tech guy, can I get a whiteboard? I got like 3 verses to get there. Sorry. Chapter 2, verse 1. Yeah, we're going to do this whole book. Don't worry. Some of you are like, I got to get out of here. No, I'm just going to keep you. It's okay. But if you get up and leave, I won't blame you because let's be honest, I can't sit still without Adderall, so you're good. Chapter 2, verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. Ruth, the Moabite, said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick whatever grain is left over behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. Naomi said to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out and entered the field and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turns out, she was working in the field alongside Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. How are we doing on that whiteboard? Okay. I think they're coming. All right, let me just skip the whiteboard. We're good. We'll do it next service. Here we go. So imagine. So some of you are like, what is this gleaning nonsense? Let me explain to you how this works. Now, in the ancient world, if you're farming, it's not like what we think. When we think of farming, we think of Nebraska, big tractors, combines, everything's good to go, and they have hundreds of acres. Not so in the ancient world. You have roughly an acre to an acre and a half. And what you do is, let's say you had a square plot of land. What the scriptures command you to do was to leave the corners unpicked. And if you were picking anything and it fell, you couldn't pick it up. Why? Because it was made for gleaning. Gleaning was a provision that God made for the foreigners, for the widows, for the Levites, the priests who don't own property, as well as for the orphans. Those who could not take care of themselves had an opportunity to come and glean the corners of the field and whatever was left below. But here's the thing. God said this because everything He'd given the people as a gift. He'd rescued them from slavery in Egypt. They remembered what it was like to be foreigners and powerless and have no economic opportunity, to have no land. They remember what it is, and everything you have is a gift from God. Therefore, just your corners give for those who are in need to come and glean. But here's the problem. Throughout the history of scriptures, every single farmer asked this, how big do my corners have to be? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I left the one tree in the corner. I'm a good religious person. They can glean. Some of the people are like, hey, everything that falls on the ground, that's fine. I'm just going to have a big net underneath me so nothing else comes. Look how smart I am. And there's this question, the degree to which these people would be compassionate to those in need. And I stop and explain this, friends, because this is the exact same question we're going to lean into today. Is as a church, I say we are called to compassion. And if we, like them, are gleaning, let me just say this, how big are our corners going to be? Are you just going to say, hey, I've left this one tree in my corner for people to glean, and I'm going to feel so good about myself. Once a year on Christmas Day, I'm going to roll by someone who's homeless, and I'm going to give them a 5 and like, look, I'm doing my thing. I'm being compassionate. Or what you do is start thinking, oh my gosh, how big can my corners grow so that I can provide for other people? And here's the problem. If you become more generous, everyone shares about it. I was like, psst. Boaz corners are huge. His laborers are horrible. They drop stuff all the time. Everyone go to Boaz's place. They're the worst farmers ever. But man, there's groceries for days. So you have a reputation. You see, friends, I want to be a church that has big corners, where we stop saying how much can we spend on ourselves and how much can we give away. You see, friends, this is a challenge of being in America today. Yes, we can talk about gas prices. Yes, we can talk about cost of living. But here's the thing. If each of us have a piece of land, most of us don't have enough margin in our corners because what we've done is we're actually spending beyond our means. And if I had a whiteboard, you'd see it clearly. So here's this question. Will we live beyond our means where we have no more time left to stop and just look at someone? Will we live beyond our means? We're like, oh my gosh, I can't actually give extra because I need to support my family here. How big will our corners as a church be? I hope that our corners are so big that every single Friday night when there's people coming to our food pantry, we're like, oh my gosh, I think we're gonna run out tonight. I hope every time that we're hosting homeless folks here on our once a month where we turn this church into a homeless, I hope we're like, oh my gosh, we need to build a bigger building because we can do multiple services, but we can only host so many homeless folks. Let's find a way to do more. I want us to be known as a church where people come and be like, I think they're taking advantage of that church. I'm like, all right. I'd much rather be a church that's known for being too generous with our corners and being taken advantage of and having a reputation for that in the room instead of being a church that's known for how we only care for our own and we're known about what we're against instead of what we're for. You see, this is where we begin to see God in the midst of human suffering. We've seen it in 2 places. We've seen it with Ruth saying to Naomi, I am ride or die. I am with you no matter what. Because friends, why is this so critically important? Because so many times when you cannot see God in your life, he will bring another person to embody his presence and remind you that you are not alone. God, I know I can't see you, but I've put that person right next to you at work. I put that family member who keeps calling you. There's that one person at church who always remembers my name and asks me how I'm doing, and I think that person actually cares, and I don't know why she's doing that. It makes me uncomfortable, but I seem known and loved, and in that moment I know I'm not alone. So friends, if you want to know where God is, I pray that you have a supernatural, powerful encounter with him right here, wherever you need it. But sometimes he puts someone in your life like a Ruth just to remind you that you are not alone. And sometimes, friends, when it seems like God is not there to provide for his people, maybe, just maybe, you get to be a Boaz that says, I'm going to have bigger corners and I'm going to find a way that instead of doing more for myself, I'm going to do more for others. And we'll be a church that's known in the community for what we're doing for others. And I know where some of you are living beyond your means. I'm not trying to blame you or shame you. What I'm trying to do is say, hey, can we live within our means? Can we then actually find a way to be more and more generous as time goes on? With our time, so we can stop with someone because we're not too busy. As we see someone hurting, we can stop and be with them because there's margin in our calendar. When there's opportunities to give, instead of being like, I just don't know what I'm going to do, like, this is so fun, this is so awesome. There's people in need. And it goes back to this gleaning thing, friends. To us, it'd be super weird If there was a portion of your pantry where I could come in any single time and just take from it, you'd be like, that's really weird, Kyle, you need some boundaries. And I do need boundaries, because if I do come to your house, I will look in every single part of your house. Just warning. Some of you, I've been to your house, you're nodding. Yeah, he does. But in this moment, when the people of God realize that everything I have is a gift from God, my ancestors were enslaved in Egypt. They were foreigners and powerless, and the God of the universe had compassion on them, saved them, and rescued them. And now I have this land, not because I earned it, but because it was gifted to me from the generation ahead of me, which was gifted to them by God. And now everything I have is there for others. This is the picture of where is God. He's in his people who say, I'm ride or die with you no matter what. And he's with a people who say, everything I have is a gift from God, and it's a joy to give it away. So I'll do three things. I will see your pain, I will feel your pain, and I'll do something about it. Because friends, if we're a church that only sees people's pains, that's great to be aware of it, but awareness doesn't change anything. Sorry about your Instagram post. Awareness doesn't change anything. We can be people who feel the pain of others, and that's great. And sympathy is a part of what I need, but sometimes I need a little bit more than sympathy. I need you to understand my story. I need you to be able to feel it with me, but then sometimes I need you to do that third thing. I actually need you to do something about it. Seeing is awareness, feeling is sympathy, doing something is service. But let's be honest, if you do something without feeling my pain or understanding my story, at very best what happens is you become condescending and thinking that I'm better than somebody else. And friends, we're going to be a church that's all about compassion. You're going to walk out those doors, and what you're going to do is you're going to see all of these ministries that we're running, and these are just a fraction of our compassion ministries. And what we're going to do is we're going to look and see those things. But if at any moment, any one of us who's passing out groceries on a Friday night think that we're better than the person to whom we're passing them, we rob the image of God in them, and somehow we believe that we're greater than they are because we have more means. To that, I just want to say, BS. Because everything we have is a gift from God. And when we realize that God has blessed me, and I have what I have because of his blessing, I have a more humble vision of myself, a greater vision of my God, and less dehumanizing of those around me. Yeah, that's pretty good without a whiteboard. Here we go. Let's jump down to... All right, let's read the rest of chapter 2. I'm just doing this. All right. Here we go. Verse 4. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you. The Lord bless you. They answered. That's a good boss. Actually cares about his folks and verbalizes it. Verse 5. Boaz, the overseer of the harvest, to the overseers, what does that young woman belong here? Or to who does that young woman belong? To whom does that young woman belong? Which to you, you can say it as one of two things. You can say, wow, that is such a possessive thing to say, maybe. Or in an ancient world, you could say, who is responsible for her? She's obviously a foreigner. She's obviously here gleaning. Who has taken responsibility for her? You can interpret it either way. Verse 6, the overseer came back. She's a Moabite. She came from Moab with Naomi, she said. Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves left behind by the harvesters. She came into the field, and she has remained here from morning until now, except for a short rest in the shelter. This is a whole nother sermon, friends, but there's something that's dignifying when you give people the opportunity who are able to work, giving them the opportunity to work. I am not making a political case. I'm making a theological point here. Doing something for someone is often not the best thing when they can do it themselves. Verse 8, so Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go. Glean in another field. No, you don't go over there. Don't go away from here. Stay with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink of water. Wait, you're not just going to let me glean? You're actually going to let me be part of your crew? You're actually going to provide water? In the midst of a drought and a famine, you're going to... At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground and asked him, "Why have you found such favor? Why have I found such favor that you notice me? I'm a foreigner, I'm a nobody." Boaz replied, "I have been told about you, and you have done for your mother-in-law. I heard you were ride or die with my family member Naomi," is essentially what he's saying. "Since the death of your husband, how you have left your father and mother and your homeland to live with your people that you did not know. May the Lord repay for you what you have done. May the Lord be rich, may the Lord richly reward. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. May I find favor in your eyes," Ruth said. "You have put me at ease, speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar." Some of you are like, "Whoa, that's kind of cool. It's like an Italian restaurant." This is kind of a big deal. He dignifies her by saying, "You're actually going to be one of my people, and we're going to actually eat together. Because when you eat together, you're all on the same level. You're all eye to eye, and it humanizes." She sat down with the harvesters and offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave her orders to her men. "Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up. Do not rebuke her." You know how everyone else is trying to figure out how to not have food fall on the ground so that people can't come and get it? Actually, let's give her more. Where is God in the midst of it? I think the story is becoming clear. Sometimes we don't see God. He shows up through his people. Will you be a Ruth who's ride or die? Will you be a Boaz who's there? Keep going on. Verse 19. After her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who noticed you." Then Ruth, the mother-in-law, told her mother-in-law about the one whose place she had been working. And the man, his name is Boaz. Verse 20, "The Lord bless him," Naomi said. "He has not stopped showing his loving kindness to the living and the dead." Again, the dead, a reference to those that had passed before, realizing that she's vulnerable because the men who were to provide and protect were gone. She added, "That man is one of our close relatives. He is one of your guardian redeemers." You think gleaning is weird? Let's talk about guardian redeemers. In a world that's patriarchal, God says, "I see this world as patriarchal." He didn't endorse it, he just said that's the way it is. But remember when you were powerless in Egypt and someone came and saved you? Remember how God did for you what you couldn't do for yourself? If you're going to be one of my people, you got to become more like me. And if you're going to be like him, what are you going to do? You're going to go and you're going to care for those who can't care for themselves. So, in our world in which I'm not trying to trash us, I'm just trying to make a contrast here. In a world in which marriage and love is so much about me getting from me what I want, God says, no. Marriage is about how you love and serve those around you. And even to a point where here it says, you don't marry her because you love her, you're going to be a guardian redeemer, meaning that you will marry this woman so you can help provide and protect for her. Why? Because when you had no one, the God of the universe provided and protected you. So Boaz might be this guy. Fast forward. Boaz does for this woman what no one else would do. Not only can you come collect, you can collect more. He goes up, and the next day she comes back, and she comes back with 30 pounds of wheat. So like 30 pounds of wheat, yeah, that's a lot of bags. But it was crazy. The craziest part about this is not just that he came with raw materials. He actually allowed her to process her own grain there, which again is just this overwhelming generosity from Boaz's heart. And then Boaz says, okay, you need a guardian redeemer. And he goes and he finds the man who's supposed to be the guardian redeemer. I'm just summarizing chapter 3 and 4. And in chapter 4, Boaz says, hey, he goes to the elders of the city and said, hey, someone needs to marry this woman and be the guardian redeemer, be the provider and the protector for this vulnerable woman. And he says, you are the right one. So they bring the right man, the one who by law, by definition, by family should be that person. And this person looks at Ruth and says, I don't think it would be good for my family if I am her guardian redeemer. To which everyone's like, awkward. It's like the most public rejection ever. Why is it not good? Well, there's two reasons. One reason, maybe she's a foreigner. She's from Moab. It's not just from anything. She's from the land of pagan gods and sexual immorality, and she doesn't know our customs and our culture, and that would make my family look bad. We wouldn't want one of them in our family. There's also another very practical thing. In a world in which finances are so incredibly scarce, there's also a possibility that he's saying, I don't have the ability to feed this person. And if I try to feed one more mouth, I might be neglecting all of my responsibility to everyone else. So the one who is the rightful guardian redeemer says, no, I can't do it. To which Boaz says, good luck, Ruth, let me know how it goes. No. Boaz says, if he won't do it, I'll do it for him. I will do for him what he should have done, and I will be that redeemer. Just as she was ride or die with Naomi, Boaz says to her, I'll be there and be with you. The story comes to an end, and we're going to end by reading chapter 4. We're going to make some sense. We're going to land the plane in just about 5 or 7 minutes. But let me just say this. There's this moment in which we've seen God say nothing, God do nothing. And the people of God are leaning in, reading the story like, where is God? Why didn't you stop the famine? Why didn't you save those men from dying? Why didn't you move on that man's heart to take Ruth and be the Redeemer? Where is God in the story? Because it seems like there's a lot of evil and a lot of good, and God didn't show up. Let's look at chapter 4. Chapter 4, I'm just going to read verse 16 through the end. Again, Boaz has taken her as a wife. They're having a kid. Verse 16. Then Naomi took the child in her arms. This is Naomi. Now for the first time gets to be a grandma with Ruth's kid and Boaz's kids. The women living there said, Naomi has a son. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Say, what? Like, and just in case it wasn't clear, let's make it crystal clear. It doubles down on this detail, which most of us would read right over. It's a boring genealogy. Once we get to the begetting this and the begatting that, we're like, can we just be getting to the next book of the Bible? I get it. But for some reason, just ending with, he was the father of Jesse, the father of David, wasn't enough. That should be enough. David's the greatest king in the history of Israel. Everyone knows who he is. It goes on and says this. Then this is the line of the family of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Abinadab. Abinadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz. Boaz the father of Obed. Obed the father of Jesse. And Jesse the father of David. Where is God? This is the genealogy of the greatest king in the history of Israel. Is there any possible way Naomi could have thought that her famine would lead to the birth of the greatest king? Nope. Is there any way that Ruth looks at this woman and says, she has no family members, she knows no one, she's actually bitter and angry all the time, which makes her so much fun to be around. But you know what? I think if I hitch my wagon to that bitter old lady, Naomi, I think one day it's going to lead to greatness. No. Is there any way that Boaz says, oh, this girl, she is so good at picking. I wonder if I had a daughter with her, if one day our great-great-great-grandkids would be king? No. Why is this critically important? And why does the author not just say it once, but says it twice and goes into such great detail? And this is the big idea here, is this is it. When you love and serve those that Jesus has put in front of you, you have no idea the impact it can make. You have no idea that this is going to lead to again, it started with the judges, right? The judges, one of the lowest parts in the history of Israel is where it begins. And through these simple acts of compassion and kindness, through seeing people's pains, through hurting with them, through being faithful when it was easier just to do nothing, through all of these small acts of kindness, the whole entire story arc, from the lows of the judges, the lowest time in the history of Israel, to the greatest time in the history of Israel when this is written, to the King David. How? Because someone said, I just want to have bigger corners. I want to be more generous. I want to care for those. I want to see those who are hurting. I want to protect the foreigner. I want to see those who are vulnerable, and I want to be a part of it. And so they write this and say, what you have no idea is how your everyday acts of kindness and compassion change the world. And they write this and says, wow, the pinnacle, the greatest ever, the pinnacle. What happens? King David. Couldn't get better than that. About 1,000 years after David, there'll be another genealogy written. If you go, the first book of the New Testament is Matthew, and it goes and it tracks the story from David all the way to the next king, the greatest king in the history of Israel. His name is Jesus. Jesus was just like Naomi, just like Ruth. He was a foreigner. Don't you know when he was 2 years old, someone tried to kill him? So he ran off to a foreign country to hide. Don't you know that he, just like this family, lost his earthly father, Joseph? That's why we have no record of him. He also understands what it's like. He's not a complete orphan because he still has Mary and he still has his heavenly father, but he knows the pain of losing a loved one. And what does he do with his entire life? He sees the vulnerable. His heart breaks with those who are hurting, and his hands say, I've got to do something about it. Whether it's teaching, whether it's healing, whether it's feeding the multitudes. And then at the very end, it ends with him giving his life on the cross. What happens? He doesn't just say, I see the vulnerable. He doesn't just say, I feel bad for them. He doesn't just say, let me give them the corners of my field. What does he do at the very end? He gives his entire life. He becomes the most vulnerable. The God of the universe becomes vulnerable on the cross so that he can give his everything to the world. This is why we're called to compassion, friends. Because Jesus had compassion on me and died on the cross to save me. Because even in those times where I feel like God is not there, he has been there. Through his supernatural presence, through the people he's put in my life, the acts of compassion that people have put around me. So here's the challenge, church. Will you be a church that says, I'm going to create greater margin in my life, greater corners in my field, so that I can see and serve those who are hurting? To be a church that says, when I walk out of there, I know there's a 49er game, but if you're recording, it'll still be there. To walk out of there, I'm going to stop at just one of those tables and figure out how can I be part of this church and move and grow in compassion? How can I show up in the simplest moments, the way Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz did, so that someone, years later, that you may never see, may experience the love and grace of Jesus. Boaz may say, all I did was let her pick some grain, and it changed everything. Will you allow your eyes to see, your heart to feel, and your hands to serve, so that we can become a church that when people are in their ups and downs, they have no idea where God is. They say, I found him in that smile. I found him in that conversation. I found him in that food pantry. I found them when they cried with me. I found them through his people. It's the type of church I want to be about. I think this is life, and we invite you to be a part of it. Let's pray. God, first and foremost, I pray for those in this room who are hurting, those who feel like no one sees them, no one feels for them, no one's serving them, and they feel alone. And it's even worse because they're wondering where you are, God. For those who are feeling that, who are experiencing Naomi and just feeling this bitterness, like, I pray that they would see you, feel you, and experience you. For those of us who are struggling with how to see feel and understand someone else's pain, I pray that you'd open our eyes supernaturally to understand their story. Open up our hearts to feel alongside of them, and empower our hands and feet to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Lord God, as a church, I pray that we'd be known, not just for the way we serve each other, the way we sing songs to you, the way we talk about you, but the way we actually embody you with our daily acts of compassion, with our neighbors, with those who are hurting. Let us be part of your great story of redemption. Thank you for being our one true guardian redeemer, who adopted us, who rescued us, who becomes our provision and protection. We thank you, God, that you've invited us into your family. Teach us how to love the way you love, and have compassion the way you do. In Jesus' name, all God's people said, amen.
It don't have a job, don't pay your bills, won't buy you a home, Beverly Hills. Won't fix your life in 5 easy steps, and the law of the land or the government, but it's all you need, and love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storm, and I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not alone. It's waiting for you, knocking at your door. In the moment of truth, when your heart hits the floor, and you're on your knees, and love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storm, and I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not alone. This is the first day of the rest of your life. This is the first day of the rest of your life. But even in the dark, you can still see the light. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. This is the first day of the rest of your life. This is the first day of the rest of your life. And even in the dark, you can still see the light. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. And love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storm, and I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not alone.
So go ahead and take a seat. I got four of our small group leaders who are going to come and share briefly, and then we're going to wrap up. So they're walking here. Make some noise. Give them a round of applause. What we're doing in just a few weeks, what we're going to do is we are launching small groups. We say that we're a church of imperfect people. We want to share compassion with each other. We're just going to share some of those stories. So here's four of our small group leaders who are coming up. First, At the end, Chester. Give him a round of applause. We practiced this earlier. He was the most nervous, so give him some big smiles. So, Chester, how long have you been part of our church, and why did you get involved in a small group in the first place?
So I believe I came here around, I think January with my wife, and the reason why I joined a small group because I came from the Bay Area. We moved up here in December, and my life was bad, even as a believer. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't involved, and I have a struggle with addiction. My marriage is bad. I had bad temptations of not being faithful, and we all experienced that. And when we moved up here, I told my wife, I need to reevaluate my marriage with Christ. And we found Life Community, and I made sure that I joined a recovery group, a men's group, and my Thursday group, because
It's a lot of groups.
a lot of groups, yeah. I'm messed up. But I needed to experience God's love, because when Kyle was talking about where's God, it's in the body. He's there, it's you guys. And everyone's gone through stuff, and I see the hope and redemption of the passive people that've gone through stuff. That gives me hope. And in order for me to get my marriage together, my life together, and my hurts, habits, and hang-ups, I need to be in the community, because that's where I experience God's love. And I need you guys to experience His love so I can move forward in life.
Amen. Thank you, Chester. So, Michelle, my understanding is you didn't even want to be in a small group, and now somehow you are leading a small group. Can you explain how that crazy story happened?
I actually wanted to be in a small group, but it came about kind of interestingly. I came from a very large church. I was there for about 15 years, and I didn't really know anybody. And I had actually been praying for years to bring me a community of women and other people I could study with and have some relationships with. I would be studying alone, and I just couldn't find it. And I just kept thinking, well, God has a plan. I don't know what it is, and I don't know why I can't find anybody to study with, even though I had reached out to multiple groups. So a couple years later, I started coming here right before COVID. And once again, I got online and I looked for a small group, and it seemed like there was couples groups and things like that. I would be studying alone, and I still couldn't figure it out. I said, God, why can't you bring me study people? What is it? So I just knew He had a time and a place. And the reason I almost didn't get involved is because then Joy, our wonderful Joy, started here. And I asked her, I said, so what about a women's Bible study, a small group? And she said, well, I think you should start one. And I said, well, that really wasn't my plan. I just wanted to show up. I wanted someone else to do the work. I wanted to show up with my Bible, and I wanted to have a good time. I wanted to fellowship, and I wanted to go home. I didn't want to do the leading. I didn't want to do the setup, and I didn't really want the responsibility. But as we saw today, God has other plans for us that sometimes we don't know about. And it has turned out really amazing, and I've met some great friends and got some fellowship, and we've had a great time. And I hope to see some more ladies coming.
I'm glad you said yes. And there's about 15 women who are part of your small group who are also glad you said yes. Give her a round of applause. Whitney, how long have you been part of the church, and how did you end up leading a group?
Okay, so we've been coming here since January of this year, and I was actually really nervous to join a group. I'm part of MOPS, and I was really nervous because we were brand new and I didn't know anybody. But that first meeting, the ladies were so kind and welcoming, and I felt comfortable right away. And it turns out that MOPS was the launching pad for me to make new friends and community, and it's been the place that I'm now serving at. And so I'm so thankful that I didn't listen to fear, but that God gave me the courage to go, because the ladies in the group have been a huge blessing.
So for those who don't know what MOPS is, can you explain?
Moms of Preschoolers.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So I'm not invited? Sorry, yeah. So if people do want to get involved in Moms of Preschoolers, when does that meet?
We begin next Monday, September 19th.
Awesome.
And 9:30 to 11.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you, Whitney. All right. David, last but not least, you've got a very pregnant wife over there, and you also run your own business, and life is crazy. But even in the midst of all of that, we're like, hey, you're going to take a break from small group? Like, no, we're actually going to keep on going. Why was it so important for you to stay in a group even when life was so crazy, chaotic, and busy? What was it that you didn't want to lose by taking a pause on a group?
Well, we are going to take a break a little
Oh,
bit,
okay.
at least for a couple of months, just try to catch up on our sleep after the kid. But I feel like
So 2 weeks off. You heard it. No, sorry, go on.
I feel like we would lose our sense of accountability. When my wife and I first started coming to this church, we would sneak in late, sneak out early. That way no one can stop us at the door. No one can talk to us. We didn't want to get involved in any of the groups. We just kind of wanted to be left alone. And then once Joy walked up to us and says, you guys are going to be great for small groups, kind of gave us a group to start leading. And then the rest pretty much became history. And that's pretty much what the small group is. It's just church. It's you, me, all of us here together. There's only one of you. And so when one of
Praise
us
God.
doesn't make when one of us doesn't make it to church on Sunday, our majority of our small group comes to morning service. They're there. They notice that. They walk up to us afterwards and say, hey, how have things been? We missed you last Sunday. You know, is there anything you need help with? That's the community of it. They give you the encouragement and they give you the compassion that comes along with it.
Thank you so much, David. Friends, our heart is that no one feels they've got to do this journey alone, that there's people who are like you, who love you, who are there to hold your story with compassion, encourage you, have some fun together. And in those places, we see God show up. So as you go, I want to encourage you to maybe sign up for a small group at the 411 table, get some information about Compassion Ministry. And friends, as you walk out, remember that you can and you are the embodiment of God's love and compassion. Take him with you wherever you go this week. We love you. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.
This is the first day of the